All right. Show Me the Data podcast is back, and we're here with Mark Lerner, Director of Marketing at Dealhub, who also hosts the RevPath podcast. And today we're going to talk about data. We're going to talk about campaigns. We're going to dive deep into that stuff and understand how it works, what Mark did, and what was the result. We'll also talk about AI because it's hard to not to when you're in marketing and you're talking about data as well. Mark, great to have you. Thank you for jumping on the show and excited for this conversation. And thank you, Joe, for jumping too.
Great to be back as a two-time guest now. So it's fun to check in again. A lot has changed since the last time we spoke, I think.
This was like 3 years ago, wasn't it?
3 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And, it's funny to kind of look back at what we talked about and how I would approach some of those things today. And we can get into that. That definitely dovetails into the AI discussion for sure.
Absolutely. Well, shall we jump straight into it and talk about the campaign, and then we can talk a little bit about more, things that are supporting the campaign. So we talked with you a little bit about the Glassdoor that you've been running. So you've been doing. But maybe you talk a little bit about what the campaign is. What was the idea? What was the background? How did you think about this?
Sure.
And a bit of like context.
Sure. Yeah. So a bit of a context. So I joined Dealhub, my current company, just about 2 years ago. And soon afterwards, some of the things I was doing was kind of going back through the backlog and looking at some of the campaigns that had been, begun but never were executed, and seeing if there was something I could revive. What I found was that as a company, they had done this kind of scraping job of Glassdoor and some other salary job listing sites to get kind of average across different regions of the salaries for job roles in our kind of target market, which, sales operations, revenue operations. And that, campaign was set to run, in like April of 2020. Right. So as we all know, so the scraping job was done, the data was put together, and then like the day it was supposed to kind of be released, the whole world shut down. And so it never kind of got used. And what I realized was this is a perfect kind of snapshot to create a before and after, because we were at that time, a year ago, it feels like a century ago, just starting to kind of say, okay, we're in a post-COVID world, whatever that means. Clearly, there was a lot of impacts on the way people worked, on inflation and salaries. It'd be really interesting to see how these things are impacting, the people that kind of pay attention to Dealhub. So what I did was looked at the original sources of that data. It was Glassdoor and a few others. And essentially, and this dovetails a little bit with AI as well, created a bot that kind of was able to scrape the relevant job listings in the relevant geographies over the, a time period that was similar to that. And what we ended up having was kind of apples to apples, 2020 versus 2023 to 2022, whatever it was, salaries for the same roles in the same locations. And, what we then did was, we had two spreadsheets, basically two data sets. I fed it to AI. Can you find the, interesting and, maybe counterintuitive findings that's in this data, right? And I probably could have found these things had I looked at it, but this was and very quickly found that, if we looked at the United States, the growth, every region had growth in salaries. The regions that had the, outliers in growth were not San Francisco, New York, and those places. It was, these other spots, which really spoke to the diffusion of the hubs. People were remote work was a big thing. So there was some really interesting findings there. Like, the biggest growth in salary by far by region was like Minneapolis, Minnesota. Still not sure why, but I mean, it was, like orders of magnitude more than others. Maybe no orders of magnitude, but it was like, in the outlier. And so it was really interesting, especially when you saw it visually on a graph and all these things. And so we had the interesting story, we had the data, we had the kind of science behind it. How do we get people interested in it? And so what I did was, kind of reached out. Taking a step back, I host our company's podcast. So it's given me the opportunity to interact with a lot of people kind of in our space. And I basically reached out to all of them and said, hey, we have this really interesting research. What I want to do is give you a sneak peek of it and record your reaction to it so that we can use that when we launch.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's what we did.
That's a cool idea.
And so we recorded it. I got 10, 15 people. We recorded videos of it. Some of the videos we used, but what we ended up doing was for each of those people, I took quotes from those reactions. And then prior to launch, we created visual assets of for the report with their faces and quotes about their reaction and had them, sent it to all of them and said, on this day and this time, we're going to launch it. We would love for you, here's a visual asset that you can use to share it and, you can help promote it and whatever. And it was great. It was a very effective strategy. And, it kind of really spoke to, I think, this kind of duality we're in right now where AI lets us scale and do things, with less resources that we would never be able to do before. But on the other side, because that's happening, there's a premium on trust and organic and people, right? All of our inboxes are flooded with junk cold mail. There is I think that causes trust in people, in your peers to increase. And so we're able to do both. We use the AI to kind of streamline the research and generating the story. And then we use real people to help us kind of get the story out. And that was, I think, a really effective campaign. And one, we're going to do a revamp for 2020, looking back at 2024 and do another comparison here soon.
Absolutely. And if it wasn't for AI, how do you think the campaign would have panned out? What would have happened?
It would have taken much longer. I probably would have, if we did it at all, I would have had to either pay for a scraping tool or service, a lot of money. I would have to put together or I would have gone and manually done it. So either way, it would have taken much more time, much more money just for the scraping part. For the analysis, again, I was able to identify those stories and trends, basically immediately. Whereas, analyzing it myself, that could have taken, a week before I landed on the right story. Whereas, basically within 5 minutes, I at least had the, kind of blueprint of what the story was that we were going to tell here. That particular aspect of data analysis with AI, I've repurposed that recently, and it's the same thing. Humans are, we find patterns, but when the data is so large, and I'm not a statistician of any sort, so if I look at data enough, I can eventually kind of find it. But AI can find it immediately, and we'll never come close to that. So it's a really effective for that.
It's absolutely, Joe.
Yeah. It's a really I think underrated tool for marketers when it comes to building data reports. We've just built a report recently where we used AI to kind of help us find insights, and I think it would have genuinely taken us 10 times as long as it did to be able to pull those insights if we were not using AI. So it's just it's crazy how quickly you can pull together really data intensive reports, trend report, things like that. Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, I would caution that, if you throw a huge data set into one AI, always be cautious that you're looking at a, hallucination. You want to, I will try ChatGPT. I'll then put it in Claude and I'll say, okay, are they looking at the same thing? I double checked everything, because there's a tendency, especially if the way you ask it, these AIs really want to please you. That's, I guess, part of their training. And so if you ask it in a certain way, it's going to want to reinforce that. And so, you have to really make sure that you're not biasing the response to kind of, and get a hallucination that serves your purpose.
Yeah, it requires a lot of follow-ups, and you have to actually say don't have any biases. Don't. When I was doing it, it was requiring 3 or 4 follow-ups, but it gets it in the end. It gets there.
Absolutely, and I think even with all of that, it's still a 10x time saver and value. So a recent analysis I did was I was looking at a aggregate of data from usage of our platform. And so that gives us ideas about, the length of time a sales cycle takes, how many approvals it's required, the win rates across company sizes and regions and all these things, really interesting stuff. And when you looked at the data kind of just the way it was, it basically showed you what you expected. But when I was able to slice it with AI, I found all these interesting anomalies and kind of was able to build hypothesis stories around them that are super interesting. This isn't fluff. And, I think, like you said, as marketers, being able to tell stories with data, especially in B2B, is a hugely valuable asset. So we look at something like Gong, right? So often for me, Gong is a trendsetter. So years ago, they started doing this with Gong Labs, and anyone who's been on LinkedIn for a long time kind of knows that they would put out these stories if you use the F word 3 times in a sales call, you'll have a 30% increase in whatever, things like that. And it goes viral because that's such a weird, interesting insight. And so stuff like that, I think, again, there's going to be a premium on it. Storytelling, real people, trust. Those are things that are, kind of counter to the AI narrative.
Absolutely. Mark, before going to, obviously we want to spend quite a bit more time talking about AI because the whole philosophy is so different now. How marketers could apply it is so different, how they could stress test these things. But to go back to Glassdoor campaign, in terms of metrics, results, numbers, was there something what would you say you were getting in the end, or any numbers that stood out to you that would be worth mentioning, something that you could recall from that?
So I couldn't give you exact numbers. One of the things that we did and that we've done kind of more generally is remove gating from our process. And I'm a proponent of this. I think gating is a bug, not a feature. I think there's enough tooling out there that we can kind of make connections. What I do know is that in the interim, since then, I can look back and see how many deals were closed where in that person's journey that looking at that report happened, and that was there was a lot. I can't give you exact numbers, but needless to say, as a B2B, even one closed deal that's impacted by that is like a 10x on the investment that was made on doing this, especially, given the being able to kind of streamline it with AI. So it was a very effective campaign, and I still see it impacting and touching new business in their kind of history when we look at it. So it was super effective. And then, on the, for us, as a marketing team, getting, all of those influencers to actually share was definitely one of the goals, and we were able to do it. And so that was a huge, so it was, we had, a list of 30 people we reached out to, 15 of them said yes. And I think we got 13 out of 15 to actually share the asset on the day. And that was huge. So a great success, and one we're trying to, to recreate coming up here in the next month or two.
I mean, could be stronger now too, right? With the smarter models, with more 100%. With more experience on the under the belt.
For sure. And as a side note, Dealhub has a resource called RevPath, which is essentially everyday kind of a bot that goes out and scrapes all job boards everywhere and creates kind of a daily list of RevOps, sales ops jobs. That wasn't running long enough then for me to use that. but it has been running since. And so I actually don't even really need to go and run this scrape job because we have all of this information already in our database that we could, because we have this daily update. And so, and it's going to be a richer data set because it's across many different job listing sites. And so it should be a little easier and more data to work with and, richer data. So I'm excited to see how we can leverage that.
That's very cool. How do you feel, Mark? How do you feel this whole AI development and aggressive development in use? Because we're, if it existed and we didn't use it, that's a theoretical stuff. We actually are using it. A lot of marketers are using it aggressively. They're using more of it. And how does that change your thinking? Around your job?
Right. So just to give you an example, I think on my screen right now I have 4 or 5 different AI things open. So I have ChatGPT, Claude, vo.dev. I have Cursor. How many was that? 4 or 5. And sometimes I'll do Lovable or what's it called? Bolt. Yeah, exactly. And that's not to mention all of the apps that we use that now have AI in them, right? So there's no way for me to overemphasize how big of an impact AI has had on me personally. One of the things that happened was, I think not long after we spoke last time, was when ChatGPT kind of blew up on the scene, right? I think, it was when they basically took their GPT and put it in this chat user interface as a test. I don't think necessarily they thought what would happen did it happen, and it blew up, right? And so it was right around November time, I think, of 2021, 22. I don't remember. And the Slack group in my company at the time was kind of blowing up about this, and I was very skeptical because I had tried, I think, Jasper and maybe a few others, and I just didn't see the value. It just didn't seem to be clicking. And eventually I was like, fine, I'll test it. And very quickly I realized I was dealing with something entirely different. And I had that moment of holy crap, which I think a lot of people have had. And I've had it over and over again at various points. And so I was like, I need to figure out how to use this as a marketer, because I know that there'll be a time where it's going to be table stakes and not, kind of an additive. It's going to be an assumption. And so I better get on this. And so in retrospect, this was crazy, but I have very limited technical knowledge. I mean, I think as a kid, I kind of learned HTML and CSS, but that was kind of it. But what I did was, I had my sights set on really upping our company's SEO. I had seen a few companies in the space that utilized having a glossary of terms that were deeply interlinked as this really powerful kind of knowledge graph way of gaming SEO, I guess. But so I saw AI as my shortcut to that. And so over a long weekend, I had ChatGPT kind of teach me how to use APIs, and I used Airtable and basically created this glossary of terms with 50 to 100 terms, each of them with 1,000 words, interlinked on Airtable with going to the API of Webflow, which is what our website, and with a click of a button, kind of showed it all kind of getting filled in. And I demoed this on our stand-up when I got back, and I was kind of like an audible a reaction, especially from the dev people on the call. I think that they had their, moment where they realized, oh, wow, that moat, I'm not saying that every developer is going to get replaced. I'm not. But there's a certain democratization of access to things, to knowledge that has now been made. And it's, I think it's incumbent on people that are creative to use this to, give themselves that kind of technical background. And so that was my first experience, and I've gone crazy since then with all sorts of stuff, building internal tooling, UIs, backends, automations, all sorts of stuff.
Where do you think, just a quick follow up on that, where do you think we're at in the life cycle of marketers adopting AI? I feel like, Mark, you're a much heavier adopter of it just from other marketers that I've spoken to. So yeah.
Well, that's good to know. I think maybe my filter bubble makes me feel like I'm missing out, but maybe that's the point. I think there was a huge hype cycle, I think early on, where AI could not meet the hype that was being put out there. And a lot of people were just kind of fluffing it to kind of get engagement. I think that we're starting to get to a point where the capability is starting to intersect with the hype. And I think, as marketers, I don't know. I don't talk to other marketers as much about it, their day to day. I can only go off of kind of what I see on social, and I know that's curated. Every marketer is using some AI somewhere because every platform that we use has some AI. I think that, there's starting to be an expectation. There certainly will be an expectation at some point of fluency in AI. So I don't know if you guys saw this kind of letter that was leaked by the CEO of Shopify recently. Mm-hmm. So what he said there, I think he's, a year ahead of us, maybe. But that's the way I've been thinking about it. There's going to be just an expectation of fluency in this tool, just like you would have expected someone to know how to Google search something. But obviously,
and Mark, what did he say for the listeners just in the letter who haven't seen it? What was his main punchline?
He basically said that the company is AI first. Basically, everything we do is AI. It's embedded in every workflow. There is an expectation of fluency. I think was a direct quote that the way we are going to track your productivity and your weekly KPIs or whatever is going to be included in how well you're using AI. And they're also pushing their testing cycle and their product cycle to use AI tooling to speed that up. So, they're going to be, I don't know if they're going to use vo.dev or Cursor, or they have their own thing, but they're essentially speeding up their own cycle by leveraging AI. And, I think, it made a lot of buzz, but nothing he said there was crazy. I think he's exactly right. I think everyone's going to get there eventually. Shopify is just being, first out of the gate, which I think is a bullish sign for them.
For sure. At this point, when so many people and so many marketers, if we stick with marketers, they use AI, they rely on AI. The question becomes is, where do you find that line of your intuition versus going a little bit too far onto AI recommendations, right? Because you're going to get all these insights and you're going to push this stack and everything. But then when you do this strategy stuff, when you are working with campaigns, there's this your own experience that AI it doesn't know and probably will not know for a long time. Maybe until we get general intelligence or whatever. But how do you navigate that line of your own intuition versus, hey, I'm actually not going to listen, I'm going to do that. And even though this sounds very sexy, but actually, we're going to go in that direction.
It's a good question. I haven't really thought about it consciously, but there certainly is a filter that I have where, I'm just like, oh, that's clearly not the direction we're going to go. There are some kind of embedded assumptions in the model that are not aligned with, my current scenario. But I don't think I have a hard and fast rule. I think, very unscientifically, it's something of a gut thing. I have and continue to go down rabbit holes where I'll waste hours and days of my life going down, a wild goose chase set off by AI, only to realize this is not the way. I think I'm more alert to those potential to do that today, just because I've gone down them before and found myself up at 3 a.m. trying to figure out how to get here again. But I actually, and that happens a lot. But I think those are amazing learning experiences. I've gone down so many of those rabbit holes that each time I do that and I end up failing, let's say, I come out with more knowledge about stuff that I never would have learned before, because I personally, this is just the way my brain has always worked. I learn by doing trial and error. Reading things has never been very useful for me. It's really about trial and error. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of pain, but once I kind of do it, then it's it's part of, it's downloaded and it's part of like my working memory. And then I can leverage it in all the other things I do. So I try to approach everything as a learning opportunity, because like I said, we are in this changing world. I think we all kind of feel it. And the table isn't set yet. No one exactly knows how this is going to play out. But I think it's pretty clear that the expectations of workers and what they're going to know how to do and what they're going to be expected to do are going to change. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to use this time while we can to, build that skill set so that we are optimized for that future work environment.
Definitely. Mark, for the marketers who will be listening to this podcast, a lot of marketers will be, what is your suggestion on AI? What should they be doing right now? What should they be doing tomorrow and in a week to just be better? Better and actually apply that mentality that you have obviously went quite far in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things. So there's so many different angles. The thing that's really continues to excite me and impress me are these coding AI assistants. So in particular, the ones that focus on the front end, like v0.dev, Lovable, or Bolt. I mean, this is the wow factor that continues to get. You can basically go to these and say, make me an application with a dashboard like this that shows this and this. Hit send, and you watch within a minute. You've created, right? It's almost like this feeling of creation, like you verbalize it and it's created, and that's a shocking and very gratifying thing. And so I continue to kind of be fascinated by it and look for ways I can build tools that would help marketing campaigns. So instead of gating content, ungate the content, create calculators or visual, interactive assets that help enrich the experience of that. And that requires the gating, right? So give away the content up front, the interactivity, give them the extra. That's the contract is you give me your email. You can kind of see how your use case plays out based on the data we found. And so that's kind of a really interesting angle I'm going down. And I think we'll be, we're going to go away from white papers and ebooks towards interactive tools and experiences.
That's very cool. From a practical perspective, Mark, for marketers, is this would you say they should just try to do more of the day-to-day marketing stuff with AI, see how that goes as a practical path?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't already have ChatGPT or Claude kind of open all the time as your sidekick, now is a good time to start. And you have a project, you have a campaign, you have a problem, you have an artificial intelligence with all of the universe's knowledge and infinite patience at your disposal, right? Like I could have sat with someone and asked them to explain me something, and if I don't get it once, eventually they're going to get frustrated and not want to teach me anymore. You have an AI that is patient. It will sit with you for forever. It will never get impatient. And it has access to the entire world's knowledge. Use it. I mean, it's a gift. So I would say just get started now.
Absolutely.
Great advice.
I mean, I don't really have more questions, Joe. Anything on your side? Anything maybe we haven't covered? Maybe something you wanted to add, Mark, to this conversation that we didn't touch on?
Yeah,
we didn't ask you.
Yeah,
maybe final thoughts to the audience.
Yeah, so I think going back to my original episode here, I think what we talked about was this campaign or ongoing campaign I had going on, which was this daily newsletter. Where I would kind of curate 5 pieces of content each day for our target audience. And I had this kind of setup where I had a Zapier browser extension, and I'd just do 30 minutes of research every morning and send it to the RSS feed of our newsletter and write 2 paragraphs and send it out each day. There was no AI or, it wasn't available the way it is today. So if I were to kind of go back and look at that, newsletter, email is saturated. between Substack and Beehive and just all the cold emails. So it's a much harder space. And B, there was a lot of manual work involved in that workflow that could be completely automated today. And so part of what I like to do now is go back to my old plays and look at how I could make them better with AI and make them effective in the current moment. And I'm kind of looking at that newsletter play now and thinking about how to make it more relevant, because I actually retried the exact workflow early on when I started here in my current role, and it did not have the same effect. And I think that was partially because the newsletter ecosystem was so saturated that you couldn't really stand out. You have to kind of bring something different to the table. And so, I like to, when I have free time ever, I like to go back to those things that I did in the past that worked, and then look at the tools I have at my disposal today and how I could 10x them. And that's a lot of fun to exercise to do.
That's a great exercise. Just changes your thinking completely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
100%.
And that's what that's what it's about. That's what it's about. Mark, well, thank you so much. This was awesome. I mean, we obviously kept it purposely short, 32 minutes in, or maybe it's going to be 30 minutes. And if you will link your podcast as well in the description of this, of our episode when it will come out. And hope you guys enjoyed the episode as well. This is the first one from season 2.
Oh, wow. I didn't know I was the season opener. Exciting.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a few going, but this will be the first one, Mark, and I think it's a great one, and hopefully people, the audience will enjoy it a lot as much as we did this conversation.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.